Back to Road Gang Radio with Jimmy Mack, Lindsay Lawler.
Give me a minute, y'all. I'm coming.
And you, because if you're listening, you're in the gang. Take it away, founding member Phone Master Dre.
Woo, so nice we get to hear her voice twice. This is Road Gang Radio, and we are live with Jimmy Mack from the House of Dega, Passport Studios.
Hey guys, an emergency interim final rule to clean up the non-domiciled CDL system has been paused by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. That's according to Mark Schwemmer over in Lamline. On Monday, November the 10th, the court ordered that the rule, which was expected to remove about 194,000 current non-domiciled CDL holders out of the trucking industry. I'm not sure if that number is actually correct, but that's what they were saying. Not Landline. That's what the administration was saying. Is administratively stayed pending further order of the court. Here's what the court had to say in its own ruling. The purpose of this administrative stay is to give the court sufficient opportunity to consider the emergency motions for stay pending review and should not be construed in any way as ruling on the merits of those motions. By the way, as I said before, don't read into it. Don't get up in arms. Don't breathe a sigh of relief, no matter where you fall on the issue. They mean it when they say it. They're saying we just need some time to read it, and if there's anything really wrong with the way this thing is written, we want to make sure we stay it now, because if there is something seriously wrong, it has to stop. But if there's not, we just want just a moment to kind of take the time to review this, to kind of figure out where to go next. I bring this story up at the top of the show like I did, and then brought it back here for Education Station, because it's one of the many things that is percolating through the brain of the sponsor of this particular segment. Education Station is brought to you by our friends over at CarriersEdge. Jane Jazrawy, the CEO, the head honcho, and the lady who actually knows of what she speaks, joins us this morning. How are you, Jane?
I'm very well, Jimmy. I'm doing good. Ready to go. Talk about this ad nauseum.
Yeah, I'm kind of fired up about this too, because we have a lot of notes, a lot of thoughts on this, and like us, over the past couple of weeks, you've been digging through a lot of transportation news. I would tell somebody that the list you sent me, most of which I'd already read, it was kind of like, oh, great, lots of stuff that's spot on what we're talking about. No, I was excited about it because I would tell anybody, like if Dre came to me and said, can you explain to me non-domiciled and what's going on with that right now? I would simply say, hey, Jane's got a reading list. Here you go, and hand it to him. You know what I'm saying? If Claire came to me and said, I'm not really clear on this non-domiciled stuff, I'd be like, no, Claire, here you go. Here's a reading list from Jane. Get busy. Where would you like to begin? Because there is so much here that actually I think, if any good comes out of this, and there's a lot of possibilities of good coming out of this, is that we've been talking with Andy Polikoff and Martin Garci and Jeff Burkhardt, a lot of people in the training sector. This really has an opportunity for them who have been ahead of this. The first person on this show to talk about the accident in Florida and its impact on non-domiciled CDLs was Andy Polikoff that morning. Talk about what that school that gave him that CDL was all about. But where do you want to begin, Jane Jazrawy?
Well, I think one of the things that, and I want to take it way, way, way back into not even the rules and who's allowed to do what, but just about that in trucking, and this is not necessarily the case everywhere, but definitely in trucking. Like it's not just trucking. Let me just clarify this. But in trucking, there's no real shared definition of what good training is or what good education is. You talk to 15 different people, and they will probably have 15 different opinions on it. And this is something that you've been asking since the beginning of Education Station that I've listened to, which is, what do you think makes a good trainer? How do you choose a trainer? How do you find good trainers? What is that? And I think that there isn't a shared definition of what good training, a good instructor, like there's no accepted qualifications for instructors across, especially in Canada and the United States. There's just no shared definition. And I think that's one of the biggest problems, because what people do when there's no requirements is they find loopholes. And this is what I think we're seeing now, is the effect of a lot of loopholes and people taking advantage of loopholes.
I actually, because, and you're right, by the way, and there is like I said, anybody, and by the way, all this stuff exists on Spotify, on Pandora, all of this. Every episode that we've done since we've been here is there for the taking, and we do have backlogs that we will eventually get around to kind of loading in there. You're right. I constantly ask that question because in my mind, and I wanted to throw this against you, Jane, in my mind, a good trainer is a great student of trucking who knows how to communicate what they've learned.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that I totally agree with you. I think that there is, like, I think people intrinsically know when they have been trained well, when they understand something, and when you have quality instructors at a school or at a carrier who's doing entry level programs. The problem is that because it's not like and I know what a good trainer is, but the industry doesn't know, and new drivers don't know. Like people who go to a CDL school to get to get a CDL they're sometimes constrained by a bunch of other things. Like sometimes they are an immigrant, sometimes they don't know the area where they are now living. They don't know what a good school is. They don't know how to look for it. And, there's all kinds of fly-by-night operations that are saying, hey, I'll take your money and I'll guarantee your CDL. And then you have all of the other, things that are more shady. Like there's just like different shades of shady that you can get down.
Oh, I mean, like here's a piece of paper, right down to here's a piece of paper. Yeah, you look good enough. Here you go.
Yeah.
I mean, right down.
Yeah.
Right,
give me this amount of money, and I will sort it out for you. And unfortunately, because there aren't a lot of really high standards, this is what's happening, and it's just kind of getting worse and worse and worse. Especially since COVID, I really noticed that a lot of this has happened, and we've been talking about it in Canada for a while as well, where the entry level program in Canada is called MELT, which is mandatory entry level, and it's the same thing. Is that people are trying to skirt the actual rules. Like they're trying to. There's a number of hours that you have to do a certain amount of training, and people are trying to lower that amount with a whole bunch of like, oh, you have this amount of experience, you only have to do this many hours. And so putting people on the road that are not necessarily safe, or sending people to carriers, and then carriers have to do all the training to get them up to actual speed. So that was the first thing that I wanted to bring up, is that there's no standard. You don't necessarily know, which is why carriers do road tests and carriers have their own finishing programs, because it's all over the place. And people who I remember like 15 years ago, companies that would say to me during Best Fleets, yeah, we only accept a certain level of expertise. Like we do a road test, and if you don't pass the road test, you're not working for us. Now they have changed to, yeah, we need a finishing program because the skills just aren't there. And we're not getting anybody who has the skills, so we have to put something in place. So that's kind of where it's moved to, is that you have to have a finishing program because you're not getting a full-fledged driver coming in the door, and that's fine. But we still are not at the level where we can actually produce drivers who have similar qualifications/skills. So then that kind of brings me to my next thing that I was thinking about, was self-certifying. The idea that you can self-certify, which happened with ELDs, the self-certification of ELD devices, which has led to kind of chaos a little bit, because there's all of these people who are like, yeah, I'm going to self-certify my ELD. It doesn't meet the requirements, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And it's the same thing with CDL schools, because they're self-certifying. They say, okay, I meet these criteria. And, when you come and catch me and tell me I'm not, then
whoopsie.
Then I'll do something about it. Yeah.
Whoopsie.
Well, they're absolutely not doing the things they know they're supposed to do, because they're just trying to 80% will do. And that is causing another problem, is that there's nobody. And I know tons of people hate regulation and hate oversight, but this is what oversight does, is it makes sure that quality is the same. You know, you want your foods regulated. You want rules about your food and water. You also want rules about who is allowed to go on the road.
You know, it's just one of those things too where there's a great joke about there are a couple of professions where I don't know what one is, except when I get it, I understand that completely. The other problem with great trainers, to kind of go back to that just for a second here, the problem is that they come in all forms and fashions, in the sense that there are quiet teachers who have just enough pressure in their voice to get you to do the things that you need to do. There are gregarious people who work really hands-on. There are people who use a great deal of technology and kind of are able to kind of seamlessly move between the tech and the human factor, and that becomes kind of a hard thing to kind of determine based on that. The one thing that, you know, and you've been talking about this too, about the idea that I've always said my problem with good enough is if you're aiming for good enough and you miss, you're not. And it's one of those things, and the thing about standards that people don't really understand is that standards have to be high, because if you miss them, then it's okay. That's the thing, is the fact that if you set incredibly high standards, then the B plus means something in the curve of the world. But the problem is the fact that an A no longer represents an A. I'm not sure it has for 50 years. So anybody saying, that's the problem with this whole place. No, this has always been an ongoing problem. But the idea is that, and the bigger question we have to ask ourselves, Jane, the elephant in the room is, as long as people continue to want cheap labor, this will go on. Because if you properly train a driver in everything that he or she needs to know, and by the way, learning is a lifelong experience. You're not going to learn everything, even if you get a remarkable, time, an actual semester in a tech vocational program, and then you on board with a remarkable fleet, and they get you out there on the road, and you have the best of people who do the ride along with you. You still got 20 years of information to kind of accumulate before you can even remotely think that you're ready for it. The thing is, though, and I wanted to bounce this off you because I've been dying to get this one to you as well, and you've opened the door on it. My thought is the better trained they are, the quicker they understand their value. And at that point, the reason why cheap training happens is to get cheap labor. And when you train people properly, they want to get their money's worth. That's kind of my take. That's my TED Talk. Welcome to it.
No, I understand. You get what you pay for. Exactly. And people have not wanted to put money into training drivers. I don't think ever. And I'm not saying that there are great CDL schools and that kind of thing, but in general, the industry does not want that cheap labor. Yes, I totally agree with you. There has been, and this is the premise of Best Fleets, is like, stop doing that, please. And I think one of the Best Fleets, Boyle Transportation, the president of the original president of Boyle Transportation said that, trucking it's an incredible opportunity to give people really good blue collar jobs that pay well, and that's partly why the Boyle is a Best Fleet currently, is because that was kind of their mindset. But if you have the mindset of, okay, this is something I do not want to spend money on, and there's tons of labor out there, and if we can just get more and more people kind of cycling through, then we don't really need to treat them well, because we can just get more where that came from. And what that is a race to the bottom. And that we are at the bottom now, where people are on the roads through the idea that we want more and more cheap labor. People are on the roads who are unsafe, because it's much cheaper to skip things and do things half-assed and put people on the road who aren't very safe, or put people on the road who are tired. Put people on the road who don't really understand, or who have ulterior motives, or doing other things to supplement their income. I totally agree with you, because it really is. It's a short-term gain. And we're seeing the effects of that.
So we had one of your friends on the show, not on Education Station, although he'd be great. Tim Krolsky came on, and he brought Jacob Szabo with him.
Garner.
Yeah, he brought Jacob Szabo with him, who's a 20-year-old regional dry van driver and graduate of the Safe Driving Apprenticeship pilot program. And there were a number of people who, I have very, very mixed feelings about under 21 drivers, and that's an editorial unto itself. But there are lots of
Yeah.
people saying, "See, it works." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, it completely works because it was literally through one of the most rigorous apprentice programs that we've got going on, and through one of the most responsible trucking companies." I ain't got to tell you. I ain't got to tell you about Garner. And it's like it's like, guys, yeah, if you want to do exactly what these folks do, if you want to target somebody who's actually married his high school sweetheart, has a work ethic off the chart, and is willing to go through all the hoops that these apprentice programs have set up, rightfully so, and get them to on board with a company like Garner, yeah, it works. But this is one of the things we're talking about here is you can produce more and more drivers like him at not so much a slower pace, but at a more steady, regulated pace. Yeah, that's all terrific. But it's like he is not the thing that proves we should just kind of open the floodgates for anybody that wants a CDL. I'm sorry, I'm getting off here, but I'm telling you, man, there were people who were like, you see, the program works. I'm like, no, Jim Krolsky works and Jacob Szabo works, and the work ethic of all those people involved who actually set all that up. That's what works there. It's a rigorous program that boy went through. Sorry, I'm calling him a boy. That's a full-grown man. My apologies to him. I'm sorry, Jane. It's your segment, not mine.
When you're old.
Yeah.
But I agree but the thing is, it works because there's rigor to it, and I will say that it works in a way. It worked because it produced a good driver. It was slow, and it was like a lot of red tape, and there was too much process. And I think that's why it didn't work out as well. It was a really good idea. And I will say that just try good ideas, even if they fail, because you learn from them, right? One of the things that trucking is missing is any kind of certification, like national certification, that says this person, and it doesn't matter what kind of trainer you are, because when you're a teacher, you go through your Bachelor of Education and you learn the basics. So it doesn't matter what your personality is. Being a good instructor is you have to have a basis of knowledge. And that knowledge is about how people tick, how people learn, the types of, and don't get me started on my rant about, short training, short online courses that need to be 5 minutes because drivers can't manage any more than 5 minutes. That drives me like supremely up the wall, because it's not true, and it's only true in trucking. It's like, well, it's not even true, but it's only said in trucking. It's not even a thing, but it's a thing I keep hearing over and over and over again. But when you do a degree, and I'm not saying you need to have a degree to do this job, but when you have a degree, there's a certain amount of things, standards that you have to meet. And when you have an education degree, it doesn't really matter where you got it from. There may be better schools than others, but there's a basis of what you've learned.
Accreditation.
So you have that's exactly it. There's really not a lot of accreditation, and there's always been stuff with apprenticeship and different programs through colleges about what you can learn, and you've covered tons of them in Education Station. It has been really cool to hear about things that are happening in high schools, and those programs for the entire supply chain, not just driving, but driving is part of it, heavy equipment is part of it, and I love that. But that's not the get your CDL fast. And that's what we're trying to deal with all of these other rules that are coming down from the government that are not, like, basically they're just taking a blowtorch and kind of, swiping it across a whole swath of people
Well, it's
who
interesting.
may not actually. No, go ahead.
No, I'm really quickly about it. This brings us back to the non-domiciled thing, because I've always said that the problem with zombie ideas is they always end up crawling up out of the ground. And I swear to good God Almighty, I thought we had finally put a stake in the heart of the under 21 driving racket. Now, look, why not? Let's go here. I have no problem.
Okay.
I have no problem with 18 to 21-year-olds driving even interstate, provided there is an immensely rigorous program that onboards them. And I'm not just talking about because it's not a random number. I got to tell you, man, 17-year-olds are not completely formed human beings, and a lot of 19-year-olds aren't completely formed human beings. There's a lot of other stuff in play with this. But what drives me crazy is the moment they took the blowtorch with the non-domiciled CDL drivers, and there was a problem, and a lot of our friends out there on the road were screaming to the high heavens about this. I'm telling you, this goes back 3-4 years where I had people calling me and being like, you have no idea what's going on out here. I get all of that. So we take a blowtorch to that, and rather than beginning to say, okay, so how do we shore up the training programs? How do we recruit a better class of person into the thing, which of course involves more pay? What has popped up again? We've got to revisit the idea of maybe making this a little bit easier to put 21 years and younger on the highways. And I just feel like, here's an idea. Why don't you slow down for a second, make a really good pipeline that has an accredited training across the board standard. And it might give us a little bit of bump early on, but it should set up a pipeline that sets us up for more success if only a few people who collect very big paychecks would realize that if they want quality workers, they're going to have to actually maybe come out of their own salaries for it. That's my editorial. Sorry.
That is, and I totally agree. If you want a quality workforce, then give up a couple of boats.
Yeah.
You can do with one less boat, or your membership at a golf club or whatever it is. But there's a lot of luxury in trucking, and there's also a lot of
not.
A lot of not, and it's really hard to watch sometimes. It's really hard to watch people be very upset about all of these people who are coming in and doing this. And I'm thinking, yeah, but they're doing it because you set things in motion up at the top. And now we're all kind of trying to deal with what's going, with the after effects. And I think that, one of the things, and I sent you this story as well. One of the unfortunate things that has happened is that people are getting swept up in this blowtorch who, are fine, who are non-domiciled, but they're fine. Like they've been non-domiciled. They've had a CDL, but they've been here since they were 2, and it has all been fine. Or the Ukrainians who are fleeing the war, who came over, and now they're getting swept up in it because their work permits aren't one of the ones that are included. And I think that's a really sad thing. And that's why I mean by a blowtorch, because they've thrown out the good and the bad, and everything goes down the tubes. And you can't make super sweeping rules without really hurting people.
The other problem is and by the way, Marshall says, I don't think age is the answer. You can't fix stupid with age. And I'm gonna deal with what Marshall has said here in a second. I don't disagree with that, by the way. And Trucker Boson says, not only do you get what you pay for, you get what you don't pay for as well, too. Well said. I'm addressing Marshall here because it's a valid point. What I'm talking about, Marshall, and this is what's so hard to kind of parse out here, to kind of really get into this. What I'm talking about here is, I don't have a problem with age, Marshall. I have a problem with thinking that age is going to provide you a cheaper workforce. And so I don't think Marshall and I disagree. I don't think you can fix stupid with age. At the same time, I don't act like we're giving people an opportunity. We're setting up the next generation. I wish people would just say, we don't like paying high rates. We're going to get a bunch of kids, because that's what a lot of these people mean. They need to just openly admit it, and then we can actually have a negotiation about that, because then we can say, well, you're not going to do that. It's like you're going to give all these people the training they deserve so they know their value and worth, and then you're going to have to negotiate with them. And it's like, you can't have it both ways. Ooh, Jane, I'm telling you.
Okay, I will just say one line, because I know that we're running out of time. The other thing is everybody else's expectations of cheap deliveries. That's the other thing that I think that society as a whole has to come to terms with, is that part of the race to the bottom is so that we don't have to pay.
The millennial discount is over.
Yeah. And, people are now wanting to recoup. They did it people always do something for free for a while until you get hooked. And then they're like, well, now I'm going to raise your prices. And so, Netflix has gone up, and Disney has gone up, and Uber has gone up, and all of these things have gone up because they got you in. and it's really difficult to maintain that free. It's free, but somebody's labor is actually being used.
Well, here's the punchline for it all, too. When people tell me, I hate commercials, I hate hearing, it's like, by the way, you can get rid of commercials tomorrow. Pay for it. I mean, that's the thing. That's how HBO Max, by the way, at least Netflix had the courage of its convictions. Across the board, the price is going up. Game, set, match. Like HBO Max and other streaming services, like going, oh yeah, we just dropped these commercials. Where do these commercials come from? You can get rid of them if you spend $5 more a month. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, and by the way, this is why Silicon Valley, since Jim is editorializing this morning, why not go a little bit further? This is why Silicon Valley.
I'm pushing you, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's why their business model sucks. It's like they basically used a drug dealer business strategy. Give it to them for free, hook them in, and then literally like now it's time to pay. And people say that's capitalism. You're right, it is capitalism. You know what else is part of capitalism? Counterparties that tell people to go pound sand. That's what capitalism also is. So that's it. There you go.
Well, capitalism is profit at all costs, right? So when people are the cost, then it's unfortunate.
It's why we have regulations. That's what regulations actually in their best version are for. It's like, I'm going to profit off of clean water by bottling it, making your water dirty. No, you're not. That's what's going on here. Jane, final thought. You get the final word here before Lindsay arrives on the scene. I get her fired up too.
I would say that good education has a value, and when the industry starts really looking at what that value is and putting a number on it, and maybe taking a step back and saying, okay, how are we actually going to move things? How are we going to get people into the industry? We're going to have, this is a terrible last thought, but what I think is going to happen is, what people are predicting is that we're going to have a shortage. We're going to have a true shortage, but we're only going to have it short term. And then hopefully with whatever regulations come up, we'll be able to kind of right size it to fix it. But I think it's going to be nasty for a little while, unfortunately. But I think that doesn't mean that there's no hope. I think it just means that we have to all sort of think about what's fair and think about what the actual value of the job is. And drivers are valuable, and trying to make them into a commodity is unfair, for sure.
It's grotesque. I will go a little further than that, as I get to hear my voice in the background. That was kind of really awesome, by the way. Jane Jazrawy has joined us this morning, one of our favorite people in the whole widest world. Education Station is brought to you by CarriersEdge, by the way. Jane, I love you. As I've been telling everybody all morning, nothing you can do about it. Thank you, my friend.